righty. I think we are going live. Looks like we are live. Welcome to the Sound Money Podcast, everyone. If you are watching this via YouTube, congratulations. If you're listening to this on Spotify, iTunes, or one of the channels that this podcast is being broadcasted out on, congratulations. Thank you so much for stopping by. I'm your host, Steve McGarry, and we're exploring a little bit today into what it means or what it takes to become rich in the United States. So, this data is all going to be around a Charles Schwab survey that was taken earlier this year, I believe. And it goes across the different generations and what is basically the mindset around what you would do with $1 million windfall of cash all of a sudden. And a lot of it has to do with things that are like the mindset of people when it comes to seeing friends on social media and buying power and things like that, or buying decisions. So, the first part that I wanted to go over is what it means. Your assets offset your expenses, and you have freedom. You have time to spend, and time is the most sought after commodity. It is non refundable. You do not get more time. And I think that if you are truly rich, you have the most of that commodity. Like you are able to cherish the most time with friends, family, whatever it may be. But that is the most sought after commodity, no matter who you are. If you're a human being on Earth, that is the most important commodity to you is time. So someone that is rich, in my opinion, and a lot of people would agree. I don't know many people that would disagree, but I'm sure there's a few out there. Is that you have the financial freedom to effectively spend time how you see fit, and you are not necessarily in a certain bucket. Like if someone's telling you what to wear, what time to be somewhere, aka like a 9 to 5 job, paying you in exchange for your time, that is not going to be or get you to become rich. So that's kind of how I'm framing this conversation or this episode, so that you know where I'm coming from when we talk about being rich. And a lot of this data that I'm about to dive into here is, around a similar concept. It's usually around money, just because money triggers that ability to offset your expenses, and money's kind of the root in which we measure your success and being rich. But ultimately, there's a lot of ways to measure it. You can be happy, you can be extremely happy. And like I've said in a previous episode, $75,000 a year was that plateau where you are actually more likely to be happy if you make that much. And above that, it is like a diminishing return of happiness. So, really interesting study there. I covered that on a previous episode. So if you haven't heard that, go check that out. So here I want to go first into the. With all that being said, now that you guys know where I'm coming from, let's go through what the actual numbers are. When CNBC, they went through 1,000 adults between the age of 21 and 75, what personal net worth they would need in order to be wealthy. The responses varied by generation. Boomers, for example, said they needed 2.63 million to be considered wealthy, while Gen Zers said they needed a significantly less, 1.49 million. So they broke it down by the different generations. Gen Z 1.49, millennials 1.94, Gen X 2.53, and boomers is 2.63. Most Americans don't have nearly that much money. The average U.S. household has a net worth of $692,100, according to the Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances. That means total assets after you've subtracted any liabilities. Since the super rich can pull up the average, the median net worth, or those at the 50th percentile, may be a better gauge, and that's $97,300. Still, 60% of Schwab's surveys Respondents are either optimistic that they will be wealthy within at least 25 years, or already consider themselves wealthy. So the survey is pretty in depth. It goes through a lot of information, but the root of all of this goes here to this Business Insider article, where we go through about 20% of Americans are upper income, or AKA rich. According to the Pew Research Center, this group of earners makes at least 2 times the national median household income, which is $59,039. And this was from 2016. So pretty outdated here. But this is still around the same. It's slightly different now, but this is the most updated one that I could find. The nationally, the threshold for rich in quotes is $118,080. This is very different depending on the city that you are in. For example, that exact amount or slightly above that is going to be the whole other episode that we can go into later. The idea here is that when we talk about being wealthy, being rich, $118,000 a year. In relation to the survey that I talked about previously, or the study previously, where 75,000 was that magic number, this is slightly different than that, primarily because they are going by the different cities here. So Tampa, Florida, 102,000 is considered wealthy, which is where I moved to. Memphis, Tennessee is 99,000. Miami, Florida is 102,000. And Cleveland, Ohio is 104,000. Orlando is 104,000. Las Vegas, 108,000. Oklahoma, 110,000. Pittsburgh, 112,000. San Antonio, 112,000. Detroit, 112,000. Indianapolis, 113,000. Jacksonville, 113,000. Milwaukee, 116,000. So these are all numbers that have to do with the median income versus how much it takes to be in the 1%, the top 1%. So, for example, with the one that I just mentioned in Wisconsin, to be in the top 1%, you'd have to make $312,000. The median income is $58,000. The metropolitan area is $1.6 million. And scrolling back up to the city that I just moved to, which is Tampa, Florida, we are looking at, let's see here, looks like to be in the top 1% in Florida, $385,000. Median total income is $51,000 in Tampa. Metropolitan area is 3 million people here. So as you can see, numbers are very, very clean cut when it comes to these types of surveys, but there is a lot of nuances that come into these studies here, because you are going over the entire state, also analyzing a city, what it takes to be in the 1%. And in my opinion, going back to what it means to be wealthy, there are a lot of things that go into making $1 million. Many people want $1 million, but they don't want to work the amount that people that make $1 million have to work. So every multimillionaire that I know works 24/7, 365. They are on. It is a characteristic in their person where they are literally working at all hours of the day. I love to work. I know the majority of people that I hang around with love to work, because it is just us as human nature. Scarcity is what drives us to make progress, always has. Abundance hasn't really served us that well as a species, but that's a little bit deeper than I wanted to go with this. The main point that I want to get at, beyond the different cities here, beyond the different places that are in this survey by Charles Schwab, I mainly I don't want to shill the Charles Schwab survey about what it takes to be wealthy. I mainly want to talk about your frame of mind around happiness, of wealth, time, having more time to hang out with friends, family, do what you want to do, and offsetting your expenses with assets that are producing cash flow or any type of income generating stream that you can develop, whether that's a skill online, whether you're designing or whatnot, if you can offset your expenses, you are set to be wealthy because you have time. You have time to spend. And the last piece is the survey. So this is after a windfall of $1 million was handed to you as a person in 2019. So when asked what you would do with $1 million windfall, more than half, 54% of the survey respondents said they would spend it on a house first, followed by cars and travel. In addition, they said they would use the funds to pay down debt, 28%, invest 23%, and save 21%. In comparison to other generations, Gen Z respondents were most likely to say that they would save at least a portion, 37%. So when we look at these figures and we look at if you have debt, you need to get rid of it. You need to get rid of it. There's good debt, bad debt, but if you have student debt, if you have anything, you need to be chipping away at that first. I think that is primary. That was one of the biggest goals of mine in my 30s was stay out of debt, stay as far away as you can, make sure that you're investing and basically just try and offset as many expenses as you can. If you're having some cash flow, say, all right, that pays my phone bill. All right, this asset pays for my internet. This pays for my washing machine. Like you have all of these things that eventually offset your expenses, and that second one there, the reducing debt, 28% would use their funds to do that. That should be the half, the housing and travel. I agree, owning property is fantastic. I recommend everyone do that eventually, but first, got to get out from under that debt because effectively the things that you usually have debt in, like credit card debt, are really, really dangerous to have long term. So 23% investing, I think that's a healthy number for sure. In terms of where they're investing, there's a lot to be said about that. And I've gone over that multiple times on the podcast about different assets that can be invested in. I've interviewed the CEO of Flippa, which is an alternative asset class having to do with buying web properties like websites to generate cash flow. I've talked to many people in the cryptocurrency community about investing in high risk assets with high yield and great returns. But there's real estate, there's all sorts of things, stock market, all that good stuff. But I think that 23% is a little bit lower than I thought. I think that reducing debt should have been number one. Investing is probably where you would sit housing. Travel should be lower, I think, because that's something that if you come into $1 million, if you just traveled around and spent $50,000, $100,000, 10 to 20 years later, you would really, really be upset that happened unless you invested everything that you got. Because it's not how much money you get, it's how much you can keep. So it's not like a quick influx, and that's from Shaq, actually, guy who owns like 100 Subway and 100 Five Guy chains. Brilliant businessman when it comes to that. But that's kind of the gist of what I wanted to talk about today. Is the moral of the story is in most cities, if you want to be in the top 1%, it's about $300,000 per year is what you're making. And then if you are making $118,000 or $120,000 around the United States, you are considered wealthy, which is great. If you do want to become wealthy, you need to sacrifice your effort. You need to be able to completely crush it 24/7 and work extremely hard. If you look at all the top performers or all the top gainers, like your Jeff Bezos, your Elon Musk, all those billionaires, they work all day, 16-hour days. There's no slowing them down. And I think that many people want $1 million, but they don't want to work for that $1 million. So I think that's something that is a mindset that people need to get past. And investing what you can, when you can, dollar cost averaging into whatever asset you choose to go into, just to make sure that if any fluctuations happen, you are averaged out. And I find that travel is kind of a bizarre one that may or may not be a generational thing that they're doing here with the Charles Schwab survey. But overall, good findings from these surveys. I'm excited to share all of it with you because I think it's important. I think it's important for everyone to have freedom and time and to make sure that they are responsible with where their money's going. And this is a great example because $1 million windfall is kind of a good number, a good number. And if everybody's saying that the wealth, if you are, what is it, 1.59, I believe it was, 1.49 Gen Z is considered wealthy, 1.94 is considered wealthy in millennials. So really interesting data. And I'm excited to see where this goes. They're going to be doing more of these studies over the next year or so. Especially, there's clearly massive gaps between the earnings of different people, as we all know. And in the past, I've touched on this. It was a touchy subject, but if you provide a lot of value to the market, you are rewarded in our marketplace with money, and that's just how capitalism works. So it'll be interesting to see how these surveys reflect, given the gig economy's almost, or it is over half of the workforce now. And that is it for this episode. I hope you guys like it. If you did, think about subscribing and staying around. We do these every week, and I love talking about these types of topics. And I've talked so much in the past about happiness, finding financial freedom, talked to so many CEOs that are focused on these things for their employees, as well as using business and technology to get to these goals. I think that if you are an owner of any business, or if you are not an owner of any business, that is the root. You need to own some equity. You need to own pieces of something. You need to own a piece of a business if you want to achieve this level of wealth that we're going through here, that all the generations agree is over $1 million is considered wealthy. So that's it. And I will see you guys on the next episode of the Sound Money Podcast.